The air in the tent was a damp, biting cold, clinging to the wool blanket and seeping into the bones. A thin, silvery frost coated the inside of the canvas, sparkling faintly where a sliver of pre-dawn gray light pierced the seam. Outside, the world was still mostly a silhouette, but the camp was beginning to stir. The first, hesitant crackle of kindling catching fire cut through the heavy silence, followed by the deeper thrum of distant voices, low and muffled. Footfalls, heavy and slow on frozen earth, moved between the tents. The smell of damp earth mixed with wood smoke and the metallic tang of chilled iron, a scent that promised a long, hard day ahead. Even the breath felt heavy, visible in the frigid air, a cloud escaping with every slow exhale. The weight of the coming decision pressed down, as tangible as the cold itself. His own breath plumed out, a ghost in the dim light of the single oil lamp that now sputtered on a rough wooden table. The flame cast long, dancing shadows on the taut canvas walls, making the small space feel even more confined, like the belly of a sleeping beast. A rich, earthy scent of damp canvas mingled with the dry, aged aroma of tanned leather from his worn campaign chair and the maps unrolled nearby. The air, though still frigid, carried a faint, coppery tang, perhaps from the metal fittings of his armor stacked in a corner, or perhaps just the raw, primal scent of 1,000 men waiting. His fingers, still numb from the pre-dawn chill, traced the grain of the rough-hewn wood, feeling the splinters and imperfections. Each tiny sound from outside, a distant grunt or the clink of a bridle, was amplified by the stillness inside, a drumbeat to the impending dawn. The decision, though not yet spoken, was a physical weight in the pit of his stomach. The rough wool of his cloak, heavy with the night's dampness, settled around his shoulders like a second skin, a familiar comfort against the biting cold. It smelled of wood smoke and distant campfires, of countless nights spent under the open sky, a scent that now felt both grounding and suffocating. He sat on the simple campaign stool, its 3 legs pressing shallow indentations into the packed earth floor, his back deliberately turned from the tent flap. The flickering lamp, his only companion, cast his shadow long and distorted before him, a silent, watchful giant. His hands, still strong and calloused from years gripping a sword hilt, rested open on his knees, palms facing upwards as if awaiting an offering or a burden. The silence, punctuated only by the distant, rhythmic breathing of the encampment, pressed in, amplifying the tumultuous whispers within his own mind. Each thought was a stone, heavy and cold, accumulating into an unseen wall, obscuring the path ahead while illuminating the one behind. The silence inside the tent, heavy and still, was slowly fractured by the world outside. A faint, almost imperceptible rustle of canvas, then another, like a sigh carried on a breath of cold air. From beyond the thick flap, the camp began to stir with the quiet, deliberate rhythm of an awakening giant. First, the distant, muffled clink of metal on stone, followed by the soft, rhythmic creak of leather as equipment was gathered. Low, indistinct murmurs rose and fell, not yet words, but the deep hum of men preparing, their voices swallowed by the pre-dawn chill. Shadows, previously absolute, now began to soften, hinting at the faint, gray outlines of other tents, hushed sentinels against the encroaching light. Each sound, each subtle shift in the darkness, felt amplified, a slow-motion symphony of anticipation building towards an unknown crescendo. The very air outside seemed to hold its breath, thick with the scent of damp earth and the promise of movement. The air, when it finally reached the man's face, was a raw, biting thing, stealing warmth from the skin with an insistent, unforgiving grip. It carried the dense, mineral smell of earth recently thawed and refrozen, a scent of clay and wet stone that spoke of the river not far off. A low-lying mist, thick as spun wool, clung to the ground, blurring the outlines of the outermost tents and dampening every sound further still. Here, at the very edge of the camp, where the packed dirt gave way to sparse, winter-hardened grass, a delicate filigree of hoarfrost coated each blade, sparkling faintly like scattered diamond dust in the nascent light. The cold seeped not just into the bones, but into the very fabric of the world, making the few lingering embers from a forgotten watch-fire appear hesitant, fragile. It was a cold that demanded silence, a deep, pervasive stillness that felt like the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for the sun, or perhaps for something else entirely. The silence deepened not just in the air, but settled heavy within the ranks of the waiting men, a profound quietude that absorbed even the faint crunch of hoarfrost under an occasional shifted boot. Their breath, plumes of white against the fading night, was the only visible movement, a slow, rhythmic exhalation that hinted at the deep, patient life beneath the cold steel. Each face, indistinct in the pre-dawn gloom, was a study in quiet endurance, etched with the shared anticipation of a moment that had been whispered about for weeks, months even. Their eyes, though, were not entirely still. They flickered, almost imperceptibly, towards the distant, slightly larger tent that promised an answer to the morning's profound question. The weight of their tools, the cold, familiar metal of a pilum in a gloved hand, the chill of a helmet rim against the brow, was a familiar anchor, but today it felt different, charged with an unspoken potential, a silent hum of what might come next. They stood not as individuals, but as a single, breathing entity, a dark, patient mass woven into the fabric of the mist-shrouded landscape, waiting for a single signal. Beyond the silent assembly of men, where the mist still clung like damp wool to their cloaks, the air thinned, allowing a new sound to surface. It was a faint, almost shy whisper at first, a ceaseless murmur that seemed to rise from the very earth itself, distinct from the rustle of the sparse, skeletal trees. The path here, softened by recent, persistent rain, absorbed the faint pressure of a boot, leaving only a dark, fleeting impression on the damp soil. Each step felt heavy, not with effort, but with the quiet contemplation that such a sound invited. It was the sound of moving water, unseen but undeniably present, a low, liquid hum that promised both barrier and passage. The chill, though still biting, carried the dampness of an open expanse, hinting at the river's cold breath. This ancient, flowing presence, hidden within the pre-dawn gloom, was the unspoken destination, a boundary waiting to be acknowledged, its steady song a quiet counterpoint to the camp's profound hush. Back inside the general's tent, the world shrank from the vast, damp expanse to the intimate, wavering circle of lamplight. The quiet hum of the unseen river now faded, replaced by the soft crackle of the lamp wick, a tiny, persistent pulse against the profound stillness. His hands, calloused and strong, moved with a familiar, almost ritualistic slowness. They held a simple loaf, coarse and plain, its crust firm beneath his thumb. No grand feast, no delicate morsel, just the sustenance of a soldier. The scent of baked grain, earthy and comforting, filled the small space, momentarily pushing back the damp, metallic tang of the cold air. He broke a piece, the faint tearing sound amplified by the silence, and brought it to his lips. The texture was dense, substantial, a grounding weight in the hollow of his stomach. Each deliberate bite was a small anchor, a moment of simple, undeniable presence before the unknown shape of the coming day. The last bite swallowed, the general felt a subtle shift, a barely perceptible loosening in the deep, cold fabric of the night. He lifted the tent flap, and the immediate world widened, revealing not the full light of day, but its hesitant, unfolding promise. Eastward, beyond the dark, sleeping forms of his men and the faint, smoldering embers of campfires, the horizon was no longer a featureless black. A profound indigo, almost purple, bled into a lighter, bruised gray along the furthest edge, where the sky met the low, indistinct line of distant hills. The air, still damp and heavy with the earth's slumber, now carried a faint, clean chill, an invisible tide pushing back against the lingering darkness. A single, almost imperceptible sliver of pale rose emerged, a quiet whisper against the vast, patient canvas of the sky. It was the world breathing in, preparing to exhale. He turned from the sliver of pale rose, the quiet whisper of the sky, and stepped back into the tent's close, shadowed warmth. The air within was still dense with the scent of old leather and lamp oil, a familiar, comforting weight. From a nearby chest, his hand found the cool, smooth heft of a polished bronze plate, its surface catching a faint gleam from a flickering lantern. A low rustle of thick wool and linen followed as he pulled on the padded undertunic, the fabric settling with a soft sigh around his shoulders. Then came the leather straps, stiff and yielding under his fingers, cinching the bronze pieces into place. Each buckle clicked, a sharp, precise sound, echoing slightly in the stillness, as if locking not just metal to leather, but intention to fate. The familiar weight of the armor, piece by piece, settled onto his frame, a second skin of protection and authority. He felt the firm press of the shoulder guards, the snug embrace of the breastplate, each securing strap pulling taut against his muscles. It was a ritual, a silent, almost meditative act, the sounds of preparation the only company in the pre-dawn quiet. He pushed aside the heavy tent flap, and the cold, damp air of the pre-dawn struck his face, sharp and clean after the enclosed warmth. His breath plumed white for a moment, dissolving into the pale, uncertain light. Before him, the gathered men stood in ordered ranks, a silent sea of shadowed forms stretching into the gloom, their helmets catching the first tentative glow from the eastern horizon. A profound stillness hung in the air, broken only by the faint murmur of a nearby stream and the occasional, almost imperceptible shift of a horse's weight. The general felt the eyes of thousands upon him, a silent, weighty expectation that pressed in from all sides. The metal of his armor, cool against his skin inside the padding, felt like an extension of his very will. He stood on the threshold, a line already drawn, the world holding its breath. The path ahead was visible now, stretching towards the faint shimmer of water in the distance, a boundary waiting to be crossed. Each man, a silent sentinel, waited for the smallest sign, the merest movement of his hand, to unleash the inevitable. The first heavy boot broke the silence, sinking with a wet thwack into the churned earth, a sound quickly swallowed by hundreds, then thousands of others. A low, guttural murmur rose, the collective breath of men moving in unison, punctuated by the rhythmic crunch of gravel underfoot and the slick squelch of mud. The air, still thick with the damp chill of pre-dawn, carried the faint, metallic scent of cold iron and wet leather. Each step was a deliberate, weighty commitment, the ground trembling slightly beneath the synchronized march. The distant clatter of supplies being adjusted, the soft creak of leather straps, and the deep, even cadence of breathing wove into a single, hypnotic pulse. Mud splattered upwards in dark arcs, clinging to greaves and tunic hems, a testament to the heavy passage. There was no hesitation now, only the relentless forward momentum, a growing current of men, iron, and will, flowing towards the faint shimmer of water ahead. Then the dense, interlocking branches of the old trees began to thin, parting like a heavy curtain drawn back by an unseen hand. through the sudden, quiet gap, it appeared, not the roaring, formidable barrier imagined in dark campsite whispers, but a narrow, silver ribbon, winding gently across the muted landscape. A shallow river, its surface a shifting mirror, held the cool, bruised purples and soft grays of the pre-dawn sky, reflecting them back with an almost tender humility. A thin, ethereal mist, white as breath on a winter morning, clung low to the water, obscuring the far bank with a delicate veil, hinting at what lay beyond without revealing it fully. The rhythmic crunch of boots faltered for a moment, a collective breath held, as the leading men, their faces etched with the night's march, saw the water shimmer. It was smaller than legend, yet impossibly vast in its implications. The general, on his mount, felt the river's breath on his face, a sudden, cool caress after the long, humid night. The faint murmur of the water, a hushed, ancient song, seemed to rise from the dark depths, a sound both calming and deeply unsettling. His cloak, heavy with the night's dampness, stirred against his leg as a soft wind ghosted through the reeds, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant, sleeping fields. He did not dismount, but sat perfectly still, his gaze fixed on the faint, ethereal mist that still veiled the far bank, a barrier not of stone or legionaries, but of an unspoken future. The cold steel of his saddle, the familiar leather of the reins, offered a small, solid anchor in a world suddenly rendered fluid and uncertain. Each slow breath tasted of the unknown. His stillness was profound, a single point of absolute calm in the vast, awakening landscape. The mist, now thinning, began to reveal the contours of the land beyond the Rubicon, a land that felt both familiar and utterly alien. He could almost hear the distant, unseen chirping of waking birds, a fragile chorus against the deep silence of his own contemplation. The horse beneath him shifted slightly, a soft, reassuring warmth against his leg, a living anchor. This wasn't about the clash of armies yet, or the roar of the crowd, but simply the immense, quiet weight of a singular breath, a choice poised on the very edge of morning. Every human, at some point, stands on such a riverbank, gazing into a future that hinges on a single, irrevocable step. The air itself seemed to hum with the unspoken question, a silent vibration against his skin, urging him forward, or holding him back.